nyanje jemur zondan nyingmi rang zondan monum chimbur ngam jabta bakar tar ngam samdo shirmar do tomba tikje chanla ki shigam tsar ne chen ruwar sirngi jang khang san jawar tikje chanla yalar man jime panzo jawla surang de ugong ji toban pora shinji lo
The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it, hear it, receive, and uphold it. I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings. Let's generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let us now begin our class. Currently, we're studying the Surangama Sutra. Within the Surangama Sutra, we have studied that Venerable Purna asked the Buddha if the four great elements truly pervades the Dharma realm, then how could they be compatible with each other? Because each of the four elements carries different characteristics. You can say four great elements, or 5 or 7 great elements. In the previous chapter, we studied the 7 great elements. The space, earth, or ground, all of them upholds different property. Then how could the nature of them pervades the whole of Dharma Dhatu? This is what we're currently analyzing. After studying the Surangama Sutra, it's going to change our particular view, because usually we think that every phenomena within the Dharma Dhatu is of one flavor and of one entity, or everything within the phenomena are of one flavor and one entity within the true Alaya. Many of you would think in such a way. But to think in such a way is because you have not studied the Surangama Sutra yet. Because you cannot make such claim within the conventional or the ultimate. You cannot say that everything is of one flavor and of one entity. There is not one thing that could encompass all the phenomena. Within the conventional truth, when we talk about the different characteristics, all the four great elements each uphold different properties, and very different properties as well. Then how could they be infused within one Dharma or one entity? Or whenever we talk about the Alaya, my Alaya and your Alaya and then Shakyamuni Buddha's Alaya, is it of one entity or of other entities? That could really lead to many different questions and doubts. But this time, if you can study Surangama Sutra well, the Buddha gives us the answers very clearly. Throughout the study of Surangama Sutra, I think many of you are quite passionate about this teaching. Such kind of curiosity and longing for the Dharma is really crucial. Otherwise, if you were to listen to the Dharma but not listening to the Dharma, not paying attention, and while listening to the class but browsing online or doing other things, other chores in life, this is really not the proper way of listening to a class. You can just turn off your Dharma class and wholeheartedly focus on whatever you're doing. It would be very difficult to spread your one mind onto two things. It's very difficult to split your mind. On top of that, while listening to the Dharma teaching, you have to carry your questions while listening. This is the proper way of listening and the proper way of studying. This year, indeed, I've been giving more teachings than usual. I teach 6 classes a week, other than special events that we have, such as making offerings to the Dharma Palace and special events like such. I give teachings 6 days a week. This year, in general, we have everything over here has been going rather not too bad. We haven't really had lots of obstacles. In general, in fact, the management team had prepared lots of things to prevent obstacles to happen. We usually would say that before the wind bellows, we have to build barriers to stop the wind or slow down the wind. And before the flooding, we have to build dam to prevent flood. This is the particular saying that we say in Tibetan. It is to say that we have to prevent the future obstacles to happen. We had done lots of work to do so, though that you may not be aware of. Those were the things that we had prepared for a long period of time, so that you won't be too disturbed about registration, too disturbed about going back and forth because of the pandemic. So everything had been well for the first half of the year. I understand many of you think that I have great merit, therefore I'm here and everything is going well. On the other, I would also argue it is because of our effort in synergy. It is because of our efforts together, not out of spontaneity, nor of causes and condition. Do you understand? Okay, so let's continue with the sutra. Over here, the Buddha said that, Purna, you also asked whether the nature of water and fire would not destroy each other if the natures of earth, water, fire, and wind were all perfectly fused and pervaded the Dharma realm. Well, the Buddha said that, well, the four great elements. You asked whether the natures of those would destroy each other or would, since we talked about how they are all pervaded throughout the 10 directions within Dharma Dhatu. And your question, your doubts are that if each of the nature of the great elements, since they're different, would they cancel each other out? For example, the water element and fire element, it is one can harm the other. We usually would say that water and fire doesn't go together, right? So the two, since they don't go with each other and they could harm each other, then why don't they cancel each other out? Or if one were to be stronger than the other, why doesn't one extinguish the other? This is the first question. And the second is that whether subtle emptiness and the great earth would not be incompatible if both pervaded the Dharma realm. This is the second question by Purna. Since you asked this question, the space or emptiness, the characteristic is without obstacle, it is penetrating, but the ground is obstacle. The ground would create blockage and barrier. These two carries two very different characteristics. How could the two, nature of the two, be pervading of the whole Dharma Dhatu? Why don't they either fuse into each other or cancel each other out? Since these two carries two completely different, completely opposite characteristics. So these are the two questions that Venerable Purna asked. And then the Buddha started to make an analysis of it. For example, Purna, the substance of emptiness is not the myriads of things, and yet it does not prevent the inclusion of all appearances within it. This is definitely our questions as well, isn't it? It is not just Venerable Purna's question. Previously, we've been talking about the four great elements being of one taste and one entity within the alaya. In such a way, how could the four great elements, which are inanimate, to be of the same or to be of one taste and one entity within our Buddha nature, within our Tathagata and not canceling each other out? Why is that? And then the Buddha tells Venerable Purna, saying that the space, in fact, are not myriads of things. The space doesn't have the characteristics of the myriads of things, such as the mountains, where it could include woods and flowers, bushes, as well as earth and sand, all of those myriads of things. But the space does not group the myriads of things within. At the same time, it does not prevent the inclusion of all appearances within, so it does not exclude the other things to manifest. For example, things that would appear within it. I think this example is quite essential if we were to look at it from the angle of mind, because this Tathagata is not something that has all kinds of characteristics, all myriads of kinds of appearances. At the same time, the Tathagata does not exclude the myriads of things to appear. The Tathagata, through the example of space, I think this is such a wonderful example. A great numbers of great masters would use the example of space to give the example of their minds. According to the treasury of Dharmadhatu, where Venerable Longchenpa used lots of examples of space, where he said that my example of space is that it is not void. It is not completely devoid of anything. Rather, it is that all kinds of phenomena could manifest out of the solid characteristics. It is from such an angle. In the commentary, it says that such kind of a true characteristic does not exclude all kinds of appearances. The Buddha continued to say that, do you know the reason why, Purna, the empty space is bright on a sunny day and dark when the sky is cloudy? It moves when the wind rises up. It is fresh when the sky clears. It is turbid and hazy when the weather is foul. It is obscure when a dust storm breaks out. It casts a bright reflection on a pool of clear water. So, from the angle of the space, the great space, the sky, in fact, it could manifest all kinds of appearances. Since the space does not exclude anything, though it does not uphold the myriads of appearances, but it could manifest all kinds of, or include all of those kinds of appearances, such as whenever it's bright, whenever it's sunny, then it is bright. Whenever it is cloudy and dark, then the space or the sky is cloudy and is dark, and it moves when the wind would rises up, would move. Well, it moves, then of course the space within would move as well.
基乘啊，就是基乘的话呢，比如说我们这个下完了雨啊，或者是下完了雪以后呢，这个天空就这个雨后的这个天空，雨后的天空rain or 比较这个清凉了啊，就
after
或者是很这个
snow, we can see that the sky would be cleared up.
啊，就是麒麟的话呢，我们地上这个冒的那种这个气啊，
after a fog and haze,
然后如果虚空当中
then the space would become foggy and unclear, would be rather quite turbid.
还有呢就是随着这个土尘就是随着这个灰尘的这种飞
along
扬的
with
话呢
the
那这个呢就是在
dust
虚空当中
storm or
变成了
sand
这个雾霾
storm,
就是这个
those
虚空
kinds
呢
of
你看大
smog.
城市里面就是
Whenever there's
像成都
smog,
就是
especially
这
if you
个
can
近视
see
一河的话呢
those
好
large
像那个
cities
就
such
是
as
到处都是这
Chengdu
个
and those
雾霾
metropolitans,
弥漫的就是这样的然后
they
那个
used to have
水呢
lots
就
of
是如果
smog.
在虚空
So
当中
the
水
space
这个
can
澄清
definitely
一河的话
have
呢
that kind
那
of
这个水
appearance
中
as
呢就是
well.
可以显现这个倒映就是就影像就是因为
And
这个虚空
the
它本身
space
的是
can
没有什么
cast a
射线的
bright
但是
reflection
虚
on
空
a
也是有时候
pool,
我们什么大
on
的这个
some
湖泊里
clear
面呢
water
就是
surface.
就是
Let,
有一些
let
水
it
池
be
里面的话
large
那就是
lake and
上面的
pond,
这个蓝天
you
呢
would
就是也
still
可以
be able to
显
see
现
the
在这个
clear
空
blue
间呢就是
sky.
中间也有可以这个现现吧像以前唐代的什么这个杜甫啊李
Some
白
of
啊
the
就是他们的
poets
经常用
from
这个树的倒影呢
Tang
就是来这个
Dynasty,
写诗啊
Du
就
Fu
是这
and
样
Li
的话
Bai, they
其
usually
实
would
虚空呢
write
就是
poems
就没有一
about
个
the
证据但是
reflection
它
of
也
the
在这个
trees.
澄清的水当
But
中呢
that
就是经
is
常
really
显
to
现这个
describe
从
how
这个层
space
面来
doesn't
讲呢
have an
虚
entity.
空
At
它
the
自
same
己是
time,
没
it
有
can
本体的但是虚
appear
空当中
in
呢
the
就是
reflections of
可
clear
以
water.
依靠外在的这个因缘呢
From this
可以现现
particular
其实我们
angle,
的
we can
这个
see that
性
the
或者
space
是
doesn't
如来
have
藏的话呢
a
就是
solid
它本身就是
existent
如如不
existence.
动的
However,
但是依
within
靠
the
这个外
space,
缘的话
it
呢
could
就是确实我
manifest
们的可能
all
性
kinds
当
of
中也可以显
appearances
现这个
through
外面的善缘
relying
呢就
on the
让我们
causes
产
and
生善性
conditions.
外面的恶缘的话呢让我们产
Similarly,
生
when we
恶性
apply that
然后
teaching
外面的
onto
就是
our
种
mind
种的
or
无记的
our
这种因缘的话呢让我们的
Tathagata-garbha, the
心呢也
nature
产
of
生这个无记
Tathagata-garbha
的这个
is
状态
not
还有就
moving,
是外
but
面发
with
生的一
the
些不同的
outer
事的话呢
conditions
就让我们
and
这个产生什么
the
后
outer
悔啊
causes,
苦恼
then
啊就是
all kinds of things
就
could
是
manifest
悲
within
伤啊
our
等等
mind.
就是有
The
各种各样
good
吧就是
connections
这
and the
样
good
那
conditions
么
would
就是下面就是问啊
induce
就
the
是
kindness
一
and
语
good
运啊
heartedness,
就是
and the
如
vice
实
would
书房
induce
诸
the
有
vicious
相
kinds of mind.
为应
The Buddha
一生
continued to
啊
ask, What do you
为
think
复
of these
空有
conditions which
然后下
come
面就是
into
佛陀的
existence
弟兄
at
问啊
different
你是怎么
places?
想的
Are
然
they
后
created
有
from
这
these
么就是不
conditions
同的这
themselves,
个
or do
方
they
向的
find
所
their
有的这
origin
些
in
相啊
emptiness?
就是刚才有些
So
是
the
土
Buddha
尘来
said,
的有些是什
Well,
么
all of these
这
kinds of
个
appearances, where do they come
就
from?
弹氧来的
Some
有
of
些是
them
云来的
are
就是以
based,
不同的方向
some
不
of
同
those
的这
conditions
种
are
法当
from
中呢就是
dust
出现
and
就是这么多的这
sand,
个
some
相
from
那么
the
这些这么多的
clouds
相呢
and then the
就是
sun.
就所有的这些现象
From
的话
all
呢
different
依
kinds
靠
of
他们自
conditions
己的这
could
个因
create
而产
all
生呢
of
还是
those
这个
myriads of
就是在是虚空
appearances.
当中有而产生的就是有而现象的就是
So
跟
these
我们前面
appearances,
的这
do
个
they
问题
rely
也
on
是
their
一样的
causes
比如说依
to
靠自己的
appear, or
因
do
而
they
产生的话呢就是
appear
刚才
in
什
the
么太阳啊
space
云啊风啊还有这个
because of
什
the
么这个气
space?
啊土啊
So
水
this
啊
is the
就是
same
大
question
概有6、7个吧
as
就是
would
那么
we
这些法当中所产
analyzed
生的呢
before.
还是是
Do those
这个这
appearances
些都是在
manifest
虚空
because
当
of
中
their
显现的
causes,
就是
like
虚
the
空里
sun,
面
clouds,
产
and
生的
wind,
就是这
and
样的
the
如必所生
earth,
啊就是
sand,
如果
water,
说是必啊
the
就是
few
它真的必
different
的话呢就是
conditions that we
这
talked
所
about?
有的这
Was
些
it
刚
because
才
of
7 个
that,
法的
or
话呢它们
was
各
it
自的这个
because
因缘
of
当
the
中产生
space so that
啊
they
就比如
manifest?
说这个太阳呢就
And
是
then
从
the
太
Buddha
阳的阴
continued
当
to
中
say
阳光
that
是太阳的阴
if
当
they
中
arise
产生的然后
from
这个东阳呢就是
these
从风当中这
conditions,
个产生的
then
然后
prana,
澄清的话呢就是
on
刚
a
才那
sunny
个
day,
就是
since the sun
清
is
就是
bright,
清澈当
all
中
the
这个产
worlds
生的
of
等
the
等
10
这样
directions
子如果
should
各自的
take the
阴当
form
中
of
产
the
生的
sun.
话呢那就是佛陀
Earlier,
说
the
就是
Buddha
这样是
already
不可以
mentioned the 7 kinds of
跟这个
phenomena
弗洛
that
纳
could
尊者来
cause
这个
the
进行
changes
分析
of
就
the
是说是
space.
弗洛纳
And
就是
then
且
he
是
pointed
导
out
致
that
即
if
使
the
日
7 kinds of
即使
different
日
phenomena
释
were
放
to
世界
appear
培为
from
日
its
食
own
云和
or
空
their
中
own
更
causes
见
and
面日
conditions, such
它
as the
所
sunlight,
它其中呢就是我
were
们这里
to
分
be
析的是
caused
刚才有
by
7个法嘛
the
就是7个
sun
法当中
and
这是把这个
movement
太阳
from the
就是作为
wind
一个
and
点
so
来
on.
分析的
This
有
is
其他的
not
6个这个
reasonable. And
法
then
包括什么
the Buddha continued to make the analysis, saying that all of the 7 different kinds of phenomena, the dharmas, for example, to take the sun as the specific example that we're going to make the analysis, since there is sun and hence the light, and we're pointing out that the light that is produced by the sun, if it is produced by the sun at the time when sunlight pervades the whole of the ground,
就日光的话呢，就是这个现在我们就是普照大地的这个。那这样一来，就是十方世界呢
While it pervades the whole ground, then the world of the 10 directions would be of the color of the sun or the light of the sun,
就是太阳的这个光
would carry out
比如说
the
我们
sunlight.
这个拉拢的话呢，
For example, in
不管是
Larungar,
这个什么
at
时候
whatever
只要有
time,
这
as
个
long
光
as
明
there
只
is
要
light,
早上起来以后都是有
when
光明
you get up
有
in the
光明的
morning,
时候的话呢，那这个地方的话呢，都有太阳。为
then
什么
at
呢？
this
因为
place
刚才
there
说的
is
这个光明
sun,
是从太阳
because
产生的，
the
不是
light
这个
comes
虚空
from
的
the
光
sun.
明
It
太阳
has
产生
nothing to do
如
with
果
the
太阳产
space.
生的话呢，哪里有光明
If
的话呢，
that is
在
true,
哪里
then
有太阳
wherever you
哪里
see
都有应该有
brightness,
太阳
there
因
should
为
be a
它的
sun,
因就在哪里。
because
那这样
that's
的
the
话呢，
cause
它
directly
的
lead
这
to
个太阳
brightness.
呢，就是应该在哪里。如果真的太阳在哪里的话呢，
If
你为
that
什么说是这个
claim is
空中呢，
true,
就是能见到远远的这个太阳啊？就只有在一个
can you
这个
say
太空
that
当中呢，
you
就是
see
看到
this
就是哪里
sun
有这个太
in
阳，
the
就是并没有
sky?
说是你凡是这个所有的这种空间
Or
呢，就是
is
只要
there
能
only
看得
one
到的
sun
这
in
个
the
空间呢，都
space?
有太阳。那你为什么不说呢？如果是真的是这些光明是太阳当中产生的话呢，那你为什么制止这
If
个
the
虚空当中的那个
brightness
热呢？
comes
虚空热
from
呢，
the
就是你为什
sun,
么不承
then
认？
why
比
would
如说
you
我们经
point
堂当中
the
的话呢，就
sun
是一般经堂
inside
里
the
面的话呢，就是
space?
太阳没有照，
Because
但
as
是呢，
long
实际上
as you
有
can
这个阳
see
光，不然的
space,
话你
there
没有
should
开
be
灯的时候，
suns
经常
around
你
there
还
or
是能
in
看得
there.
到嘛。那这样的话呢，你这个
How
经
could
堂里
you
面呢，
only
就是只要有
point
光
to
明
that
遍照
only
的地
one
方，
sun?
太阳就是应该是有的。
On
为什
top
么
of
呢？
that,
因为光
in
明是太
our
阳当中
shrine
产生的，
hall,
光明你现在不是承认是有
though
的，
that
那有的话呢，
there
就是
is
你承
brightness,
认
but
就是
there
它
is
的
no
因就是
sun
太阳。
inside.
那这样的话，只要有这个光明的地方，就是太阳就是无不周边的啊，就是。但是你如果要是承认的话呢，你
As
不
to
敢这样
your
承认，就是太
proclaim
阳就是
that
只
as
有
long
在
as there is
虚空当
brightness,
中，就是
there
这
should
个
be
我们
suns
的这个
around.
教室里面每
But
一个
that
地
is not
方有一
true.
点就是光明的地方都有一个太阳的话呢，就是这个是可能说不过去的。所以
If
呢，就是
wherever
第
we
一
see
个说
brightness
是
in
你是
our
从这个
classroom or
太
in
阳
the
当中
shrine
产
hall,
生的
in
话呢，
wherever you
那
are,
这个
there
是
should
不
be
合
one
理的。那
sun
这样类推
hanging
的话呢，
over
就是
there.
其他
That
的
is
包括这个云
that
也
is
好，风
not
也好，
what we
其他都是可以
perceive.
意义这样类推，就是在这里呢，就是只是其中就是把这个
And
太阳
that
作为一个
applies also to the
就是
clouds, the
就现在的
wind,
话来
and
讲，就是作为试
all
点，
the
就是作为一
other
个
different
这个比喻的
causes
就是
and
教典
conditions.
来就是进行分析的。
Now, the sun is
若是空
the
明，就是如果不是太
example
阳当中
where
产
the
生的
Buddha
这个
made
光明
the
的话呢，就是
analysis
实
to
际
this
上是这个
particular
虚空
point.
当中产生的话呢，那空
Now,
明
the
自照
next
明和
claim is that
众
if
效云
emptiness
无
is
致
bright,
是不生光
emptiness
辉
itself
就
should
是说
shine.
如果
How
你
does
说
it
是这样的
happen
这个光明
that
的话，并
when
不是
there
太阳
is
当中
covering
产
of
生的，一个
clouds
虚空
and
当中
fog,
产生的。
there is no
那
light
如果
in
是虚空
evidence?
当中产生的话
Well,
呢，这个
if
虚空呢
brightness
应该
were
自
to
己
be
能照，就
radiated
是自己
from
只要
the
有虚空
space,
的地
then
方的
as
话
long
呢，
as there is
就让
space,
这个照耀这个光明呢。如果这
there
样的
should
话
be
呢，你为什么
brightness.
说是这个
In such a
中
way,
效
why would
就
it
是
say
中效
that
的话呢，就是
in
就
the
中阴
mid
就
of
是
the
晚
night,
上，然后呢就是云雾，就是
and when
那么
there's
中效和云
fog
雾，就是有云和有雾的这个时候呢，
and
就是为
clouds,
什么是不生光辉呢？
why
因为那
are
个时候
there
呢
no
就是虚空
brightness?
还是在啊。
Because at that time, even
虚空在，但是
at,
为什么呢？
even in the
因为虚空
evening
在的原因，
and
你为什
even
么
when
说
there are
是这个
clouds
就
and
没有
haze
光明呢？
and
因为这
fog,
个云雾这个所覆
there's
盖的
still
时候的话
space.
呢，就是虚
How
空
come
还是
there
在
is
的
no
啊，就是这
brightness?
个虽然云雾已
In
经
the
这个
evening,
覆
we
盖
see
我
that
们那
there's
个下
space,
午
but
就
it's
有时候
dark
是大
when
雷啊，
it's
或者说是
hazy
这
and
个
cloudy,
无云密
especially
布啊。
when
但是呢，
it
那个
is
时候就是就为什么
in
不说这个
during the
云
time
雾
of
这个阳光呢？
thunderstorm
就
when
因为
there's
那个
thick
时候就是
layers
虚空
of
中存在
clouds.
嘛。虚空这个光明是你不是说是虚空当中产生
How
的？
is it
那
that
如果是虚
there
空当中
is
产
still
生的话，那为
brightness?
什么不产生这个光耀？就是不光辉，就是为
Because
什么
you're
不产
saying
生光
that
耀？
brightness
那
comes from
如果你说
space.
是这个
In
有的
those
话，那就是
situations,
那你不能这
why
个承
is it
认嘛？
not
因为晚
bright?
上的话呢，没有路灯，没有这个电灯的话，那就是根本没有这个光明的。然后呢，
In
就
the
是无云
evening,
密
if
布
we
的时
don't
候
have
的话呢，就
light,
是那那个
lamps,
时候的
or
话呢，就是也没
electricity,
有
or
这个
any
像
kind
这
of
个太
light
阳
source,
照
there
射
is
的
no
那样的这
brightness
种光啊，就
at
是
the time
没有这样的。
of
所以你如果
dark
承
clouds pervades the whole sky, then there is no sunlight that could shine through those clouds. At that time, there is no brightness. And then in the sutra, it says that you should know that brightness is not the sun, is not emptiness, and is not other than the emptiness and the sun. Now over here, it says that we cannot say that the brightness relies on the sun to be produced, because if the sun were to produce brightness, then it is of causes and conditions, and we had already denied that it is because of the sun that there is brightness, nor it is of the production of the space, because that would be without causes and conditions. It would be of spontaneity, which is also unreasonable. Other than these two, the third possibility is that it's not other than emptiness and space. How could there be that kind of production? It is to say that it is produced from the son of a barren woman or produced from the hair of a tortoise. So this so-called causes and condition, this brightness, in fact, whenever we truly analyze it and make observation of it, it is not possible for it to be produced in such ways. It is simply in our conventional world, it manifests, and it definitely can be perceived, and it manifests. Therefore, it is called the dependent arising. Master Oyi and Master Yuan Ying, as well as other great masters over here, talks about this part and describes this as the true, wondrous, enlightened brightness. And then the next part is about without any evidence. Now, the next part, according to great numbers of masters in Chinese Buddhism, considers that the truly wonderful enlightened brightness all the way to they will appear would be, the order would be right after this particular passage, and then we'll go back to we'll go back to the contemplations again. The rest of them would be the same. Master Yuan Ying and Master Oyi thinks that it would be a good idea to talk about this passage first, because in this way it will be more logical to explain and logical to understand. Also, it follows the same pattern, the same description as the previous parts of the sutra. So this is how the Tibetan sutra is. This is the order of the Tibetan translation as well. So let's look at this part first. It says that the truly wonderful enlightened brightness is the same way. This part is the same as when we talked about the space. Since the space doesn't have any appearances, at the same time not excluding all kinds of appearances. Our mind is exactly the same. Our mind does not exclude any appearances. At the same time, it could manifest all kinds of appearances. So this mind is very similar to the space. The wonderful enlightened brightness, and sometimes it is the enlightened brightness, the wonderful nature. There are lots of different ways of explaining it. But in fact, it is the luminous awareness, the Talagatagarbha. If your karma finds expression in emptiness, then emptiness will appear. If your karma finds expression in one or another, such as earth, water, fire, or wind, that one will appear. If your karma finds expression in them all, they will all appear. In the nature of our mind, there is no appearance. Previously, we've already learned that as long as there is karma, everything would manifest, would appear. So the Buddha told Venerable Purna, saying that this empty luminous
这个这种注释当中也是就是用这个业力来讲的。然后
or
这个
expression in emptiness.
如果你像空的话呢，
According to the Chinese masters, the empty luminous is explained as karma. But in the Tibetan translation, it says that if you think of empty, then there is empty or there is space that could be manifest. If you have the causes and conditions to have the appearance of water, earth, and wind, then that would also appear. To further explain that translation is to say that the sentient beings of the formless realm, since they have the causes and conditions of space or have emptiness, then that's their appearance. And for the mouse or animals or the birds, the mouse have the causes and conditions for space underground, and the birds have causes and conditions of the space in the sky. Therefore, in front of your appearance, Alaya would be able to manifest anything. Sometimes we would share some parts of our causes and conditions would be of space, and another part could be without space. Just like how we are sitting in this large shrine hall, since we share the same causes and conditions, therefore we share the same appearance. Same applies to earth, water, fire, and wind. Each of them can be brightened and each of them can be manifested. The sentient beings, some have the causes and conditions for earth, and some for water, and some for wind, and some for fire. For the different kinds of causes and conditions, thus the different kinds of appearances, that wouldn't harm any of the other sentient beings or whatever manifests in front of them. For example, in the east, maybe the beings have the karma of earth, and the west, the water, and the south, the fire, and so on. So in the four different directions, there are different manifestations. To apply that in our current situation, in the same planet, some areas, for example, in India, they're having flooding right now. In some other area, they're having problems of wildfire or typhoon or tornado that could blow the people in the houses into midair. So some places may have flooding, some fire, some earthquake, some bellowing winds. They're all different kinds of appearance of calamity. At the same time, the appearances of the non-calamities or just the regular natural appearances, but those are all appearances of karma. Maybe recently we have too much causes and conditions for fire, since we haven't had lots of rain in the summer in Sichuan province. In the morning, we were really happy to have a little bit of rain, but in the afternoon, we only heard lots of thundering, but not rain. Maybe that is because our causes and conditions of the fire has not exhausted. After a period of time, maybe we'll have more causes and conditions to have water. I have heard that in the next month we will have lots of water. That shows our causes and conditions for water has improved. It states that the alaya of the sentient beings includes the four great elements. According to Entering the Way of Great Vehicle talks about the collective karma. Because of the karma, we can see the different appearances of various situations of the four great elements. The space we had talked about, it has a light, has brightness. It could manifest brightness, and if there's clouds, then there could manifest darkness. So in the sentient beings, as long as the causes and conditions are matured, then we will be able to see all kinds of appearances. And The sentient beings would perceive the different elements in very different ways. For example, a bowl of water, some of the beings see it as liquid, some of them would see it as solid, some sees it as the female Buddha Mamaki, and some sees it as nectar, some sees it as water, and some as pus. Therefore, different beings would perceive it as very different things. At the same time, even on this one thing, there are different qualities to it. For example, if this is boiling water, then it has the quality of fire. Since it is wet, it has the quality of water. Since it's movable, therefore it's got the quality of wind. And since it is not scattered, so it has the nature of ground. So when I'm tasting this water, in my karma, these 4 great elements that is condensed into this thing can enter my body like such. When I was in the normal school, I had a teacher, Mr. Dorje. It used to be really cold in the morning, and we were really cold since we didn't have good clothing, warm clothing. And Mr. Dorje usually would hold this cup of tea, and that's steaming hot, and it has those hot steams, and we would feel quite envious of him. Now, the next one, we're going to talk about karma. How could the karma of the 4 great elements to be gathered together and then make the manifestation? Now the Buddha will make a good example. I fear that I'm getting too old, and sometimes I would forget about the teaching right after giving the teaching. If I were any younger, after listening and studying the Surangama Sutra, I would definitely try my very best to recite it and memorize it, because so much teachings within this sutra are very useful and helpful in our practice, even to our practice of Vajrayana, as well as the dispelled doubts of Buddhism, and very helpful at helping us to see the nature of our mind. And then the Buddha says, how can they all appear? Suppose, Purna, the sun's reflection appear in a single body of water, and 2 people gaze at it, both at the same time. Then one person walks east and then the other walks west. Each person, still looking in the water, will see a sun go along with them, one to the east and one to the west, seemingly without there being any fixed direction for the movement of the sun's reflection. Now, for example, in a large area of water, there's the reflection of the sun. Or if you were to hold a bowl, and then each person would be able to see a sun within it, the sun's reflection within it. At the same time, the 2 people part from each other, one walking towards the east and the other one the west. Initially, the water, for example, is in a larger bowl, and then split it into 2 into each person's smaller bowl or smaller cup. There is no more water inside the large bowl, but inside the 2 cups of the 2 people walking to the 2 different directions. The one walking towards the east, the sun would follow to the east. The west, then the sun also follows to the sun's reflection also follows that direction to the west. So one the west and one the east. This particular Chinese character, what does it mean over here? It means without certainty, right? Without a particular direction. This is my first time seeing this word used in the ancient Chinese. I usually see it in the modern Chinese, but not the old Chinese. Anyhow, over here we know that one is walking to the west and one walking towards the east. And the reflection of the sun also moves to the two directions. There is no one particular direction that it follows. At that time, you shouldn't belabor the question and say, if there is one sun, how can it follow both people? At that time, what's the point of arguing with people to say that, how could the sun's reflection go into different directions because there is only one sun? The sun's reflection doesn't have an entity. If you were to say that one runs to the west and one towards the east, but nobody would argue in such a way that the reflections are going to the two directions because there's nothing to argue about. That's simply the reflection without an entity. Since the sun is double, why does only one appear in the sky? Nobody would argue in such a way. This is just to revolve in falseness because they cannot be proved. They're all illusory, all false, all appearing emptiness, without any evidence, without anything to truly rely on. It is simply the illusory manifestation. Other than that, there is nothing that is truly existent. So in our world, let it be one or two or different entities, they would appear in front of us, but they're simply illusory appearances. But it is simply that the people would hold on to them being truly existent, especially when it comes to the Western logic. They truly seek for something that is very certain and that is extremely accurate and can be of reference. They would be very insistent on black being black and white being white. However, whenever it is from the level of law of the any kinds of aspects, there's simply the illusory conventional existence. It has the temporary manifestation. For example, water is water, fire is fire to us. We're not going to mix the two. The Buddhist point of view doesn't mix those either, but it is but according to the Buddhist point of view, that there is no entity to the things that is illusory. For example, the sun's reflection, one towards the west, one towards the east. Are you saying that there's one sun or two? If it's one or two, neither of them are correct. Because if you were to say that the two suns are incorrect, the west is false, or is the east one that is the false? Or if you were to say that the two suns' reflection is correct, then the one is not correct. Because one is one and two is two. In this way, why two manifestations or innumerable numbers of manifestations? Some people may say that, oh, this is false, this is illusory. The true things does not work in the same way. However, in front of the sentient beings, in front of the deluded sentient beings, the illusory appearances would also manifest in such a way. It is only that we can make the observation with the true ultimate wisdom, we would be able to see the differences. Now, to continue, the Buddha stated that contemplate the fundamental falseness of appearances. They're just like flowers that are conjured up in the space and produce produced empty fruit. The things that we see, all the forms are simply empty. All of them are simply illusory. Let it be the four elements or any of those things. Any of those forms that appears in front of our eyes, they are simply illusory. It is just like the person with the eye illness seeking and longing to see the flowers blossom in the space, not only waiting for flowers to blossom in space, he still waits for the flowers to come to fruition, to produce fruits, and then wishing that he will be able to enjoy the fruits after. Isn't that foolish? Since there is no flowers in this space, yet this person still waits for the fruits to be produced from the flowers in space. Now, Purna, when you ask the question about the appearance of the four great elements, the appearance of water and the appearance of fire, why can't they cancel each other out? Why can't they become one harming the other and the other one being harmed? That is why. When we make the observation from its nature, in fact, the appearance can manifest just like the flowers in space, or the sun or moon's reflection in the water, or elephants in a dream. Those are simply the conventional manifestations. For that reason, they are not going to cancel each other out. So this is the first point of view. And then let's look at the next one, which is a little bit different than the Tibetan translation, but let's follow the original Chinese translation. But let's look at it here. It says that contemplate the fundamental truth of the nature. It is solely the wonderful enlightened brightness, the wonderful enlightened bright mind. Originally, it is neither water nor fire. Why then ask about incompatibility? There is no water and no fire in its nature, then why asking about the incompatibility? The nature is Tathagata-garbha. How could the Tathagata-garbha has the incompatibility or the division or the recognition of the four great elements? And how could you ask whether there is incompatibility? Why is there not incompatibilities? Why wouldn't they cancel each other out? That is simply foolish. The questions that we have at this time, if we can truly contemplate on it, I think those questions are very well answered by the Buddha over here. Whenever we encounter such kind of questions, such as, well, if you were to say that the four great elements within the Tathagata-garbha is of one taste and of one entity, how is it not contradictory to each other? How is it not canceling each other out? How could it infuse into each other within Tathagata-garbha? In fact, this is a great answer given by the Buddha, that the nature of everything simply, at the time of simply manifests just like a dream as an illusion. That's just their appearances. In Buddhism, whenever you truly understand that everything's like a dream, like an illusion, whenever you truly grasp the teaching of the 8 examples of illusion, that is when you can look at all phenomena from a new perspective, and to develop certainty in that new perspective is the is the view of Buddhism. Now, lots of people, after studying entering the way of great vehicle and resting the mind in illusion, then naturally people would be able to understand it. At the time that we truly grasp onto any of those experiences or those appearances, those are simply chasing something in a dream. Other than that, there is no true existence to them at all. And this is not just a dogmatic proclamation. It is not because the Buddha said it. It is not because the Guru said it. It is not because the Vajradhara said it. It is after making true observation through our wisdom, we can come to such conclusion that within the awareness of Tathagata all phenomena can be included, and they're not contradictory to each other, because the manifestation is very much connected to the karmas of the different sentient beings, and the nature of all phenomena is empty, and our mind is just like the space in its nature. So, when it comes to the foolish sentient beings like us, without being guided by the spiritual friend, the spiritual teacher, we would not be able to understand such rare teachings. The great masters of the past usually would proclaim to say that how rare, how wonderful. It is not because the great masters said so. Rather, the great masters of Chinese Buddhism or of Tibetan Buddhism, at the time of recognizing the nature of their mind, they feel that, oh, that is truly wonderful. That is truly wondrous. That is the moment when you see that the sentient beings had never parted from you, and we had always felt that there is something truly existent outside and kept on grasping onto it, which is truly foolish and laughable. On top of that, if you can see the nature of your mind and everything partakes of that nature, then at that moment, whomsoever you are, male or female, through the pointing out instructions at the time of coming to certain realizations, certain insights, the state of mind would be completely different. That is the reason why the mindset would be different. If we can connect the pointing out of the nature of mind from the Vajrayana to further explain this part, I think we would be able to talk more about it, and especially according to the seven treasures, that would definitely dispel lots of doubts and further your faith and your view, as well as the insights that you have right now. Anyhow, the Buddha then told Venerable Purna, saying that, Purna, you think that form and emptiness overcome and destroy one another in the treasury of the Thus Come One. Thus, the treasury of the Thus Come One accordingly appears to you as form and emptiness throughout the Dharma realm. The Buddha points out that Purna is mixing the form and emptiness just like mixing the black and white rope or twisting the black and white rope together. This is probably because of the habitual tendencies of the Shravakas, who would still have solid grasping towards certain things. The other day when I had a reception of some very well-known celebrity or very famous people there, when they asked me questions about form is no other than emptiness and emptiness is no other than form, the question from them is similar to this question. It seems that the beings, without knowing it, tend to forcefully add the emptiness and form into the Tathagata-garbha. In fact, the Tathagata-garbha, at the time that it's empty, it is manifest or appearance. At the time of appearance, it is empty. Through this kind of dependent arising, it all pervades the Dharma realm. Therefore, it does not contradict with one another. The nature of form is empty, and emptiness could manifest the form. So that's the explanation from the Heart Sutra. It is definitely not contradictory to each other. Also, within the wind moves, emptiness is still, the sun is bright, and the clouds are dark. The reasons for this lies in the delusion of living beings who have turned their backs on enlightenment and drawing with the dust. The wearisome defilements come into being and mundane appearances that exist. All the things that we see, the phenomenal world in the appearance, at the time when sentient beings do not see the true nature of Tathagata, then the wind would bellow, and then the space would appear, same as brightness and same as darkness, and the confusions. The various animated and inanimate world of the 6 realms would appear as well. It appears from the basic ground. At the time of not recognizing that basic ground, there is ignorance, and ignorance which then leads to the 12 nirdanas, and then the manifestation of the animated and inanimate world, and then the appearances of sufferings. So the Buddha then continued to talk about the pure origination, or the pure dependent arising. With a wonderful brightness that is not extinguished and not produced, I unite the treasury of the thus come one. So this is the Tathagata. This is the illuminous awareness that is all pervasive over the Dharmadhatu. It is luminosity, it is the Dharmadhatu, and it is luminously appearing through the whole Dharmadhatu. For such a reason, if we recognize the nature of Tathagata, we should be able to include everything. We should be able to be inclusive of all the phenomena. If you don't understand it, you will be wandering in samsara. In our world, in our situations, I notice that many people don't know how to be inclusive, don't know how to be all-embracing. And people who can't do that, in fact, would encounter lots of sufferings. And whatever things or situations they would encounter, they would hold on to it further and further, which would lead to more and more sufferings. For example, if your father dies, or if my father dies, at the time of death, from the conventional point of view, everything is impermanent. From the ultimate point of view, at the time of recognizing the nature of your own mind, there is no suffering. At the time, however, if another person were to encounter the same thing, he or she may think of all kinds of reminiscences and all kinds of things that had happened, which then would lead to a great amount of suffering. The more they would suffer, the more it's going to stir up the mind stream. So even if 2 people were to encounter the same thing, the same situation, but the way that it can be perceived would be completely different. If we were to hold on to things, hold on to the manifestations of the whole samsara of the 6 realms, then we would suffer from it. But the Buddha, as well as the great masters of the past, had relied on the fifth instruction that is being pointed out here to recognize the nature of samsara, to see the nature of it. Then they can include everything. They're very inclusive. And at the same time, the great masters can create all kinds of miraculous appearances, all kinds of miraculous penetrations. Once they recognize the nature of Tathagata, this bright, subtle, wondrous enlightenment, once they had realized the nature of it, then within their insights, one could be infinite, and infinite can be one, because infinite can be in the mind of one, and the mind can radiate immeasurable and infinite Dharma. Or according to Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that one is infinite and infinite is one. Small is big and big is small. If one would be able to see the mountains and rivers and the ground within the mirror, or how Milarepa would be able to sleep in the yak horn. At the time, the yak horn did not get big, or Milarepa's body did not get small. But of course, that's very difficult for the mundane beings like us. Truly, at the time of coming to this level of realization, small can be big, big can be small. And I'm moving in the Bodhimanda, yet pervading the 10 directions. My body contains the 10 directions and endless emptiness. On the tip of a single hair appears the lands of the jeweled kings. Sitting in the moat of dust, I turn the great Dharma wheel, destroy the defilements, and unite with enlightenment. Extinguish the defilements, the 6 types of defilements, the dusts, as well as its habitual tendencies. So, true suchness, the wonderful enlightenment, bright nature comes into being. Our mind can also make friends with our awareness. But of course, we need to have some pith instructions to help us to do so. Such pith instructions can be carried out with the prerequisites. First of all, to have faith to the Guru and the 3 jewels, and the person has to have a very pure state of mind. Also, good at self-reflection and accumulation of merit, dispel of different obstacles. When you have all of those causes and conditions matured, then maybe you were a mundane being yesterday, but today you can be a saint, you can be a sage. Innumerable of people throughout the history of Buddhism had attained such supreme fruition, and we can still to do so. We can see that how a person, once attaining certain level of insights and realization, then the mindset would completely flip. For someone who truly sees the nature of Tathagata, then every experience in the insights of that person can be included. He would be all embracing to whatever situation and appearances. On the contrary, people nowadays, for example, who study mathematics or certain math-related or science-related studies and subjects, they would pay lots of attention to the formats, to numbers, to the black and whites, to the right and wrongs. They would hold on to those very firmly and solidly. People who make arguments to the others, they're not inclusive at all. They have to come down to someone's right and someone's wrong. Do you agree that you're wrong? Do you not agree? They have a particular answer that everyone has to come to. So in this way, you would be able to see that they have lots of graspings. When we studied Buddhist logic and Madhyamika, when we use the valid cognition or the what is the conventional truth and what is the measurement for conventional truth, such measurement is just a temporary measurement. It is not the ultimate measurement. By using ultimate truth, all of those temporary measurements can be refuted. That being said, within the worldly sense, we still would follow the law and the precepts that we take, as well as all kinds of regulations. It is not that we refute all of those rules. Rather, we're saying that within the conventional truth, we agree. But at the time when you reach certain levels of realization, all the worldly appearances, including the four elements, including the four directions, including all the rights and wrongs, all of those, you would be able to see the futility of them. That is why some of the great masters' behavior would be difficult for the Mandimis like us to accept. So over here it says that destroy the defilements and unite with the enlightenment. So true suchness, the wonderful enlightened bright nature comes into being at the time. At such time, then this non-dual of luminosity and emptiness, this self-aware, self-knowing awareness, this penetrating and without any obscuration, this naked insights would naturally arise.